We're now ready to welcome on stage Mr. Patu Keswani, Chairman and Managing Director, Lemon Tree Hotels Limited. Mr. Rajesh Magow, Co-founder and CEO, India, MakeMyTrip, and Mr. Raaja Kanwar, Vice Chairman and Managing Director, Apollo International Limited. The session is being moderated by Mr. Pranjal Sharma, host, The Appointment, Z Network. And ladies and gentlemen, the poll question for this session: is the culture of punishing failure the biggest reason for the youth opting for jobs instead of entrepreneurship? I request you all to please log on to the AIMA app or website and participate. Meanwhile, I request Mr. Pranjal Sharma to please conduct the session.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Last few months, we've seen a fascinating excitement in the space of startups, entrepreneurship, and I think whenever I have a chance to have conversations with foreign investors, people who are looking at India, one of the things which I flag as very distinct for India is the growing spirit of entrepreneurship. One of the parameters is if you look at the billions of dollars that are flowing in to startups in the country. I have a very experienced panel here who have done it themselves. And more interestingly, they're also helping others, new companies, people with great ideas, young scholars, young students, people straight out of college, looking at what can be done, how can they help them with their experience. So I'm going to share and ask them to share some of their experiences in entrepreneurship and new ventures, and talk about, in this session, really about what can be done to make it better. What are the lessons that we have learned so far? And is there something that can be done on the policy front or in the corporate world to ensure that we don't let this spirit falter? I'm going to begin by inviting Raaja Kanwar to talk about his experience. And Raaja, perhaps I can also request you to begin by giving a quick synopsis of the model that Apollo International follows, because that itself is pretty exciting.
Thank you. So we started a company called Apollo International 20 years ago, and this company basically, the way we started was that we wanted to be able to create a mentoring ground or an incubator for different ideas, for entrepreneurs to come to us, to talk to us about their ideas. Scalable businesses is something that we were looking at. We were not looking at the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year. And we were looking at these entrepreneurs to say that, you know, they should be very, very skilled in what they are doing and have in-depth knowledge of their field. And what we were providing from our side was a good backroom operation for them, which included HR and corporate finance, banking, corporate governance, and these kind of things which an entrepreneur ideally would not have with him or her. So we looked at some of these businesses. We look at a lot of businesses, and we've now nurtured close to about 8 businesses. And some of them we stay in, and some of them go into the market. And that's been our model, to be able to nurture entrepreneurs through partnerships.
Thanks. I'll come back to you on your experience, Raaja, on when you meet so many. How do you see them maturing, and what is the kind of feedback you get from them? On my left, Patu Keswani is a storied entrepreneur, somebody who started his career as an entrepreneur, very laid down his professional career, but what a fantastic success you made of it, Patu. I want to delve a little bit into history with you. The time when you decided to be an entrepreneur and a startup, and today. How do you see the difference and the journey that India has covered in the space of entrepreneurship?
Thank you, Pranjal. See, when I became an entrepreneur, it was 14 years ago, and India was the land of crony capitalists. Okay, so the only way you succeeded in business, or mostly succeeded in business, was with asymmetric access to information, to influence, to black money. That was the India I remember. Okay, so obviously at that time we also had the hangover of the Nehruvian era. I remember my boss, Mr. J.R.D. Tata, once telling me that Mr. Nehru used to think, Pandit Nehru used to think profit was a bad word. So that hangover had continued. And I remember my parents, my father was a government officer, my mother was an army doctor. They were horrified, okay, how I could leave a job and do this.
You must remind people what you were doing at that time.
Yeah, so I was the senior partner of a firm called A.T. Kearney, and I was earning a lot of money. So my father couldn't imagine that I would leave this. And then I started paying myself a salary of 2,000 rupees because I used to smoke and I needed to buy cigarettes. Anyway, be that as it may, in the last 15 years, what I see which is so encouraging in India is finally genuine entrepreneurship, which is asymmetric access to talent, to ideas, to execution, is now taking very strong root in India. So my time, nobody in his right mind at my age would aspire to be an entrepreneur. Even the youngsters would not. Today, I just love it that there are millions of Indians who want to be entrepreneurs. And all the key ingredients, I won't talk about it, but the key ingredients to success in a real entrepreneurial ecosystem are finally in place in India.
But Patu, at that time, there was a social stigma or there was a social obstacle to overcome to start your own business.
That's because it was, as I said, because of crony capitalism. What is crony capitalism? To me, in its worst form, it is accessing natural resources, public resources, through massaging the system, through corruption, through a collusion of interests. Okay, so for whatever reasons, if you were, especially if you come from a government background, unfortunately, and it was definitely not true, a lot of businessmen were seen to be shady people, corrupt. That was the tragedy. And that too has changed finally. But for my family, my friends, I was going into this murky world, and it was in fact the biggest barrier to entry. Let me tell you, it was not capital. This was the barrier to entry, the mindset.
That's a fascinating thing. I'm going to come back to Raaja also on this point of mindset. But Rajesh, your company was a pioneer in e-commerce. And I think when you launched MakeMyTrip, people didn't even understand what is e-commerce. Today, I think people can spell it backward, which is easier to do. But tell us about the time when MakeMyTrip came up as an idea. Did you also have to face the same challenge as a social stigma? Money would come later, but it was really managing the demons in your head.
Sure. Yeah, no, I don't think in our case it was social stigma that much, and I guess that was because we were getting into new age economy. It was internet, online technology, and so on. But in our case, it was a big issue of a trade-off of risk versus, reward. I mean, the amount of risk that you would take getting into a venture. So, the entire founding team of MakeMyTrip actually were professionals. All of us were professional. Deep founded this company in 2000. He was vice president in GE. I was vice president finance somewhere else. A couple of other co-founders, they were, having senior positions in marketing and operations and so on. So that's how we started it. So I think the bigger issue at that point in time for us was, a lot of people would say you're getting into a new age economy, internet. India wasn't really ready for internet at that point in time. No one had any idea about what .com was, especially in India. Even the ecosystem was pathetic at that point in time. And then to make things worse, 9/11 happened because we happened to be in travel business, so that impacted a hell of a lot. And then the .com burst happened. So all of that we had to kind of face, and then a lot of people, all the well-wishers at that point in time used to tell us that what the hell are you up to? Why don't you just go back to your professional jobs and careers? And I'm sure everyone is capable of kind of just getting back
and
to
focus on your EMI.
Focus on the EMI, absolutely. So I guess that was the biggest one in our case. So it wasn't like social stigma, but a huge amount of risk. Everyone perceived like it was a huge amount of risk for us to get into, especially in the .com at that point in time.
I'll come back. Raaja, today, these examples of Patu and Rajesh are exciting because they were mid-career professionals who had experience, who understood the landscape of running a business, even if they had not done it themselves, at least they were operationally in charge. The entrepreneurs and the new crop of entrepreneurs that you meet, how experienced are they, and is that relevant at all today?
You know, the entrepreneurs of today, there are a lot of them that you come across have got great ideas, and some of them do have brilliant execution skills, but one has to be very, very careful of how you proceed, and I feel this is where companies like ours come in, and with the experienced management team that we've been able to put together, we are able to help them and guide them and be very, very careful of how we invest and always keep our focus on the bottom line. You know, we are not always going after technology companies. We are looking at infrastructure businesses.
I'm so glad you say that, because it seemed to be that the only startups are in technology sector.
Yeah, that's one thing that I wanted to say, that there are a lot of other businesses and opportunities out there that one should look at. On the infrastructure side, on the waste management side. I mean, there are a lot of things that our Prime Minister is trying to push. And there are a lot of people that I end up meeting these days who are coming from that area, and they need that kind of funding. They need people who are not like private equity guys who are who are wanting to get out between, you know, after 3 years or 5 years. They want some long gestation period, investors along with them, who can guide them and hold their hand and keep focusing on the bottom line along with them.
But do you think we've moved to the other side where anybody with the idea thinks that he or she is the last word on that issue and can make a global corporation out of it?
Yeah, everyone thinks they can create a Google.
Is that a good thing?
No, not at all. So
your job is to dampen their enthusiasm.
Yeah, you have to. So you get a lot of youngsters out there who say that their idea is the idea, and there's nobody who has come up with that ever. And you know, you learn that from the earlier days of Apple and all these guys, where Apple was created in a garage. So I've met up with people who say that, you know, every time you're thinking of an idea, don't think that your neighbor or a person 2 houses down hasn't already thought about it.
How many people in the room here would like to leave their jobs and start their own company? Let's see the hands. So you know who to talk to. So Raaja has a lot of money to spend, but you better have a good idea. But it's interesting that a lot of them are people who are professionals and perhaps are inspired by Patu and Rajesh as well. But Patu, how important is experience to have a startup? Because I'm taking this conversation forward from what Raaja said, that is a good idea good enough to become an entrepreneur? And is it also fair to be inspired by somebody like you and MakeMyTrip, who created their businesses in a certain environment which doesn't exist anymore? It's a completely new environment.
See, I think when I left, so before A.T. Kearney, just for your information, I worked for about 15 years with the Tata Group. So I had experience. My last role was I was the Chief Operating Officer of Taj Hotels. So I had domain expertise. But I think what I learned, what I applied when I became an entrepreneur was, I knew what not to do. Okay, it was not what I had to do that I didn't know. I had obviously a roadmap and a plan and a vision, and as Raaja said, execution was all important. But I knew definitely what I didn't want to do, and that was not because where I had worked in the past were not great companies, they were. But I knew what mistakes they had made, whether they were legacy issues or strategic issues or implementation issues. So the first point is, my past experience helped me not repeat the same mistakes. Okay. The second is, if there is, I don't think entrepreneurship is age specific. Okay. While it's fantastic to see guys straight out of college, even I am part of the Indian Angel Network, so I participate, in occasional rounds of funding of very interesting businesses, which are unfortunately mostly IT. What I find is that entrepreneurship is simply about one thing. It's, for many years I thought of being an entrepreneur, let me say. And I just didn't do it. I look back, maybe it was envy, it was just boredom, it was, that I thought about it. You need to take that one step. That only step that you have to take is leave your job and start something, okay? Once you do it, the whole world changes. So if I have anything to tell some people I saw raising their hands, somebody also stood up, it's just do it, okay? It's not a Nike ad. It is absolutely true. And I have seen more and more people, Pranjal, today just doing it. And the younger ones who seem to just not care about the risk, I just love meeting them.
But it's again, in a way it's gone back, it's a 180-degree turn. It's like earlier you would say, oh my God, you're running a company. There must be something wrong with you, or you have some amount of stash which you're using to start a company. And today it's oh my God, you have a job. You mean you don't run your own company? So, it's turned completely the other side. But Rajesh, is there a risk where people just feel compelled to think of jumping into entrepreneurship without looking at the risk involved, without thinking it through? Again, to go back to my point that they might be inspired by you and Deep that, they started MakeMyTrip. Let me also start a travel portal and I can beat MakeMyTrip, but without a lot of understanding of what it's all about.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, but I, first of all, totally agree with what Patu said, because you have to cross the line. If you don't cross the line, then, you're just obviously taking a very, very conservative kind of a view. So you jump into it. What I wanted to add on top of that was that actually, even if you fail, it's not a bad thing. If you fail, and you had an idea, and obviously, and I'm assuming that no one is like really stupid that had an idea, he can see it, everyone else has done it and stuff like that. Obviously, there will be some idea that he's thought through. There's some weight and meat in it. You get into it. But let's say, because it's not only about idea, it's also about execution, it's also about many, many market forces that could play a role. And therefore, that idea did not work out. That idea did not take off. Doesn't matter. If it did not take off, you can try another one. And you can try a third one. I know many, many entrepreneurs who are very successful businessmen today who would have pivoted their business model more than 3 times. And that happens. And because the market evolves, and then you have to just evolve along with the market and so on and so forth. So I don't think you should, when you have taken that step, you should worry about it. You should look back and say, as long as you're obviously, doing it at the stage, and that's the difference from our age at that point in time and this age, and it's actually a welcome change in many ways, where people used to get into entrepreneurship. We also got into it after 10 years of experience. We had some sort of financial security. But straight out of the college, you have no financial security, but you have the advantage. If you fail 2-3 years, you can get back to, as long as you are, confident about yourself, you're skillful, you have some, academic background behind you, you can get back to the job. So I don't think at that point in time, the people used to think quite a lot. I don't think we should think about it. As long as you fundamentally think that you can and you want to do something on your own, get into it. Even if you fail, doesn't really matter. And I'm not saying that you would obviously not take advice from people, and you just will not take any precautions and so on and so forth. But after having done all of that, you want to do it, go ahead and do it. Fail doesn't really matter. If you fail, it doesn't work out, you go back to your professional career.
And is that so, Rajesh? Because if you fail, it doesn't matter because it's not your money.
No, not at all.
Because
in fact,
look at the number of Ps which are funding, $8 billion in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, that's one effort. And, somebody said it's burn and pray. You just burn the money and just pray that something good will happen, right? Is that the way to go ahead? You talk about mentoring also, Raaja. How do you, isn't it important for people to have skin in the game? And today's entrepreneurs, the young ones, are happy to get a few $1 million from people like you and say, all right, let me take a shot at it. If it works, if it doesn't, I didn't really lose anything.
Well, our business model always makes sure that we have the entrepreneur's skin in the game, so that he hurts when I hurt, and we'll both party together if the business does well. So I'm a very strong believer in the entrepreneur always being there, because he said it was his idea and he brought the business plan and he believed in it and he had the conviction. So he better put some skin in the game.
But now I remember the phrase which somebody used. It's called spray and pray. Right? So which means just keep spraying the money and something somewhere will take seed. But do you see that happening? So you may not do it.
That's mostly
Raaja.
happening on the technology side, on the e-commerce side today.
Okay.
But I don't see it happening in some of the state businesses, like we run a logistics business and it's not happening there. Everything is very calculated. We don't move without data being there and support from the government being there. So it's very calculated. But you're reading only about whatever is going on the front page of the newspaper.
Well, that is the problem. You see, what happens is that you create these stories and sometimes you create these myths around startups and entrepreneurs, which I won't say mislead, but give skew the entire aura around it. Patu, is that correct? I'm going to ask you to defend the technology piece, Rajesh.
No, I agree with, the point is everybody reads the papers and e-commerce is seen as the sole basis for entrepreneurship, which is obviously is just one sector. But more than that, I think that when I look at the new entrepreneurs I meet, I think most of them are aligned on two key things I consider essential for entrepreneurship. One is that you burn after you earn. Okay, I know that in some of these businesses where I blame the private equity firms because they are valuing you on scale. So they are incentivizing you to go and get a customer at any cost. So if you are incentivized to behave in an illogical fashion and you are rewarded for it, then you will behave like that. So I think a lot of the e-commerce virus is linked to this, which is the private equity and not all private equity. I know a lot of private equity, large solid firms are not touching this space. It's just a bunch of, I think, 5 or 6 who are feeding this. And interestingly, every time the valuation goes up, it's the same guy who's valuing it. Okay, so if I'm an entrepreneur who has 10% of the business and the other 90 is with Pranjal, and every time I need 100 million, Pranjal says, okay, because Pranjal knows he has to still have only 90%, otherwise I'll be disincentivized. So he's going to say, okay, now it's 1 billion, now it's 3 billion, now it's 10 billion, now it's 15 billion. I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not talking about Flipkart or anybody. I'm just saying there's something wrong in the valuation game from the way I understand it. But maybe that is the new world, number one.
No, but I just want to add to what you're saying, because I've had that personal experience where in our logistics business, in the last 1 year, I've had the big 6 or 7 private equity guys come banging on my door and said that, why can't you get into e-commerce logistics? And I said, I don't see a sense of me getting into this business because it doesn't make money for me. So he said, doesn't matter, just create a vertical and I'm going to give you $100 million and just go and blow it. So
can you refer them to me, please?
If you're willing to set that up.
I'm happy to take $100 million. I'm sure everybody in the hall is.
So there are only 2 things, as I said. One is burn after you earn. I still apply that, even in any business, any stuff that we do. The second is, I think, it's very weird in entrepreneurship when I reflect on it. You have to take 100% risk with your life, because I think the most important thing any human being can give, if he's a mature person, is giving his time. Money is a commodity for me. So if an entrepreneur is committing his time, that to me, by the way, Raaja, is enough skin in the game. Okay, not for maybe a 22-year-old, but if a guy leaves his career at 40 and is ready to start a company and take the risk, then the value of his time to me is much more than the money that you might raise otherwise. The second key thing for me in entrepreneurship is risk mitigation. No real entrepreneur takes risk if he can avoid it. Okay, so entrepreneurship is not risk taking, it's risk avoidance, risk evasion, if you will.
You are turning it on its head. I thought entrepreneurship was about risk taking.
It is not. Once you are in it, whatever you get into, you may fumble your way. I agreed with what Rajesh was saying. You start with a business model, and I've suffered because of this, by the way, because of MakeMyTrip. They started with airline ticketing. Those guys...
You have a lot to answer for, Rajesh.
Those guys somehow, without evoking Competition Commission's attention, suddenly all of them jointly made his commission nothing. So he rightly pivoted his business model and focused on hotels, which is a fragmented business where people won't be able to get together and say, look, you can't charge me so much. So there are business, you see, once you get into a business or with your business model or vision, you are bound to change it. I don't think there's any guy who's remained true to the original idea. He has adapted it to market reality, and ultimately, he may go through, why 3 pivots? He may go through 10 adaptations, but he will come to something, and that's the right one. Then you just focus. So I don't understand many of these e-commerce firms from, focusing on X, now go into a expansion or an extension. From taxis, they'll go into delivery of food. I don't understand that. I believe once you find your calling, just focus on it and make sure you can manage the risk in the system, whether it's environmental, financial, regulatory, whatever. And the chances of failing are very little. And the answer I give to anybody who's asked me for entrepreneurship is, if a company is willing to pay you, 50 lakhs a year, let me assure you, you are giving 5 crores a year to the company, if the company is rational.
That's a good point, and again, it inspires me to think of new ventures and applying for. But Rajesh, a slightly more serious issue of the regulatory environment, the taxation and the administrative regime, which in many of the new sectors is always lagging behind, and that's not just true of India, but it's globally so. The transport and the taxi aggregators are a great example of that, even as we speak. What should the government do? Is there a role for the government to encourage entrepreneurship, and what should that role be?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there is, to my mind, this clear role for the government here. Because now let's think about it. So on one side, if we say that, that India is a next to China emerging economy, and what does that mean? That it's giving that kind of a GDP growth and so on and so forth, a huge amount of potential. And if I look back, and we started, online business way back in 2000, in 16 years, I think there are many opportunities that we would have missed. So the overall infrastructure, for example, or the regulation around the FDIs and so on, just fundamental reforms around everything, they have been moving extremely, extremely slow. And yes, there are some steps that have been taken now, and there has been a lot of the, positive noise that is coming from the government, this government at least. But there's a long way to go. So let me just give you a couple of stats here. So, we talk about startup ecosystem here in India now that actually has, been doing really, really well. Everyone, it's a buzzword now. But look at the gap. So if you compare the startup ecosystems, in the United States of America, Silicon Valley, there are about 48,000 startups in a year typically that you would have. And whereas we have about 4,000. When we started, I don't think even 40 were there. So a huge amount of gap. Although we say that we are number 3 because the number 2 is UK, which is about 4,500, 5,000, and we are 4,000. We might be fastest growing. And the fundamental reason when you go to the next level and say, why is it not kind of evolving or even growing even faster, you would realize that ease of doing business is one big issue. FDI inflow was another issue. The overall ecosystem in terms of this time around that we should be on one side, yes, there will be an issue in terms of some of the private equity players are going extremely, extremely aggressive, but on the other side, the ecosystem where the angels, the seed funds, and the private equity, the institutional funds, the amount of money that has come in, and they are investing in startups. I don't think without them this ecosystem would ever work. And actually, from their point of view, we should always look at it in perspective. That's the structure, that's the model, and and a couple of guys trying to do being very aggressive. Obviously, one needs to ignore, not necessarily paint everyone with the same brush, because I totally agree. Because the valuation point is totally outstanding. Whatever is happening in e-commerce at this point in time today. Because the existing investors are investing and they're doing the next round, and they are the ones who are deciding the valuation. The real valuation will be when you go out in the public and the public value you. So and all of that will fall in place. eventually. But just from an ecosystem development perspective and what government can do from a regulatory standpoint, I think it is much more. Ranking of India today is about 130, and and we are tom-tomming about it because we've improved 5 ranks or 6 ranks.
On the ease of doing business.
This is ease of doing business. Just because we've improved 5 ranks and we've been being very, very happy about it as a country, I can't understand why we can aim to get to top 20 if we really mean business here. Because 130 out of 160, half of it, the improvement, by the way, I'm told that happened because they changed the methodology of doing this ranking system. So
that's innovation, right?
That's innovation. That's innovation in research or ranking system or whatever. So I think there is a lot that can be done. Having said that, yes, there is positive noise that is coming from. There are few baby steps, I think, in my mind have been taken. But there's a lot that more that can be done.
Raaja, do you think this whole thing about what some of the policy frameworks suggest is tax breaks for entrepreneurs and incentives and all kinds of doles? Is that a good thing? Because you're then telling young entrepreneurs that started because of the subsidy involved or the tax breaks involved, not because you really believe in the idea.
I'm sure they've put some kind of checks and balances in place, and there's some structure to the whole madness. I don't know. I'm trying to recollect if it was Singapore where they do have a minister for entrepreneurship, and I thought that was a brilliant idea to have a minister who's out there who's setting up that whole framework and making sure that there are tax exemptions and one window clearance for the entrepreneurs and some kind of infrastructure to be able to help them grow. But I'm sure it's not just like, come to us and take our money and go and
No, my point is that if you make cost and ease of doing business better, it is good for everybody, not just startups, right? So why just for startups and new entrepreneurs?
Well, the rest is there for years. So I think now it's time for startups to get some kind of boost for themselves.
So everybody had it, so they should also have it. Patu, what's your view on this? I mean, do you really
I was
need
just
to...
thinking,
Yeah.
So let me answer it slightly differently, if I may. So in the most pure form, to me, entrepreneurship is a tripod. It's 3 things. It's your business model, your idea, or your vision. It's your access to talent, and it's your access to capital or resources in the most pure form. So let me apply entrepreneurship to India for a moment. Okay, so this is based on your question. Does India have a shortage of people or natural human talent? Yes, I agree skilling is an issue, but does it have a shortage of people? Not at all. In fact, it has the most diverse, largest demographics, you name it, it's got it going. Does India have a shortage of natural resources? Wealth, capital? Not at all, except for oil, and I have a theory that in 15 years, solar energy will make oil redundant in the world. Okay. So why aren't we, entrepreneurially, the greatest nation on earth? I don't know how many of you know this. In the 1st century AD, India accounted for 33% of world GDP. Today we are less than 3. America is about 25. We were once upon a time, before the Industrial Revolution, the greatest country on earth, economically. Even in, if I remember right, in Akbar's time, we were 25% of world GDP. How we have fallen and why? It's very, very simple to me. If I apply this lens of entrepreneurship, we have capital, we have people. We've been killed by poor governance. That's the absence of an overarching idea of what India, a vision, a leadership. And what's the result? 3%, less than 3% of world GDP, and government constantly disabling. So what's the learning? Let's take one interesting sector, the same one which we love to beat, IT. The government didn't understand IT, so they didn't regulate it. As a result, we got Wipro, Infosys, TCS, we got this slew of new e-commerce companies. The minute the government understands the sector and starts interfering there, it goes down the drain.
So you don't want a minister for entrepreneurship?
Sorry?
So you don't want a minister for entrepreneurship?
No, I want a prime minister of entrepreneurship. And it looks like Mr. Modi is one
I think you already have that.
Yeah, that's what so as an Indian today, I'm very, very hopeful. Because I'm in a sector, I'm in partly real estate, where I see the worst of governance and bureaucracy. Okay, I see rent seeking, I see corruption, I see so much of it all the time, and therefore loss of opportunity. But Mr. Modi is a big hope, but my concern is of Mr. Modi and a few individuals should not drive it. This approach of enabling must be embedded in a financial, bureaucratic, regulatory infrastructure. And it must be embedded in such a way that it is politically or ideologically agnostic, neutral. It doesn't matter who's in government. That's what Singapore has achieved.
True, good point, Patu. But is that really why, Rajesh, that you also have started an initiative to help young entrepreneurs? Is it because of the complex regulatory environment that everybody rushes to launch startups in technology sector, or is it because also that the returns are faster, and if you were to invest in something like what Raaja is doing on logistics and infrastructure, you really have to wait till your hair is gray?
Yeah, no, our idea of setting up Travel Innovation Fund, from where we earmarked some capital and we started investing in niche travel and travel-related startups, was really that we realized that the innovation in technology, especially in the internet world, online internet world, I mean, internet used to be desktop-led internet, and now it is completely mobile-led internet. It was evolving so fast, and there's so much of innovation that was going on. And we saw the startup ecosystem also evolving in terms of, fresh graduates coming out of school, getting into it, fresh ideas on their mind, and they do as part of their projects, and they think and they understand technology, and they have got into something, very niche in this space, and very innovative idea, and they're ready to execute that also. And when you meet up with these guys and you realize that they can actually do it. And on the other hand, the realization for us was when you're scaling the business, you've got so much on your plate, in any case, to do that you can't really, imaginably, do everything on your own. So we said it will be a good idea for us to actually back those teams, give them some money, obviously with, proper evaluation and everything. Given the fact that they are going to be in the niche, not necessarily, in the competing space or creating a competition like us, and ride on that innovation, and if it becomes big, then you can, have potential increase your investment as you go along, or they can independently be successful businesses as well. So that was our idea, given that, purely because the innovation was really, really fast happening, and we wanted to ride on the developing ecosystem in the startup space.
Thanks. I'm going to, request all of you to share some thoughts and questions. Don't pitch business ideas. I saw you raising hands, so make sure that nobody's pitching business ideas. Do that privately. But please introduce yourself. Keep it very short so that I can take the maximum questions. I'll collect a couple of questions and I'll come back to the panel. So the gentleman there and these three in the center. Yes, sir, behind you. Can you please wait for the gentleman, and then I'll come to you. 1 second, you have to look behind you. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm quite fortunate to be with Patu and Raaja and others. Interesting to see Raaja after many years talking on this session. One of the things which
would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Vijay Rai. I'm the president and CEO with PowerCon. We are into power transmission and renewable energy. I have a quick question, sharp questions, of course. But I don't know whether Patu will have time to disclose his 2 crore secret before he joined Bain, and how he, kind of also looking at diversity within his own companies, that target which you have. But fortunately, Raaja was the one who hired me in Apollo, and I'm quite fortunate to have worked with him. So we see entrepreneurship as how Raaja was so passionately involved and created many entrepreneurs within the same business. And to name 2 important businesses, which UFO movies, which we created, which created a name and fame of itself, and we got 2 IFA awards within 2 years. 1, 2 Apollo Logistics, what he was mentioning. I understand that startup to sustainability and scale up is not so easy. Scale. And there is a poll going on here on the app that, is it failure? The biggest reason is failure, 99%, and we do not have a culture. We saw that in Apollo.
What is your question?
My question to Raaja and to Patu is that, do you think that we have enough businesses within the system which are able to start up, sustain, and then scale up? What are the hurdles, why it doesn't happen, doesn't go that long way, and how you have done it successfully? What are 2-3 mantras for
So
that?
that's a 6-month research, but we'll try to answer that. The gentleman next to you.
Okay, this is Ramashankar Pandey. I'm managing director for a German lighting company, Hella Lighting Limited. My question to Rajesh specifically, when we talk regarding, forget the absurd valuation what's going on, but even the realistic valuation, there's an incentive to become entrepreneur today because of the startup culture and the high valuation going on. Now for an employee, because not everybody will become a startup. You see in this room also 10% said they will become, but still you have employees and companies are surviving like your company now. From startup, it's a company now. You will need employees. The incentive to start a startup is so high. How do you motivate your employees now still to do innovation? Because innovation is not only belonging to startup as a culture. It also belongs to your employees. You have a fund for outsider. What happens to the people inside? The salary structure does not really incentivize, and risk versus return. Do you think something will come in between?
Yes, that's a good point. I'll come to you. The gentleman here, and then we'll come to the lady at the back.
Yeah, Dr. Tran, in academics, sir, I have a request. There are 3 important questions in the agenda note for this particular session.
3 questions?
They are already there.
Okay.
They have not been adequately addressed. Some of them not been addressed. So can I request you to please have a look at them, and if you could, each one of you could just.
Well, we did talk about the policy and regulatory reforms. We also have
could you sum up the whatever has been discussed?
That's my job. I will do it
for
later.
These 3 points. And number 2 is, you are all great entrepreneurs. You said that some baby steps have been taken to promote entrepreneurship. So my suggestion is, have you given suggestion to the Prime Minister or to the concerned minister? There is already, you can always give your feedback, your expert suggestions to them so that they can consider while, formulating certain policies for promoting entrepreneurship. Have you given suggestions to the government?
Thank you. But I must tell you that I hope you realize that today anybody and everybody can make suggestions to the Prime Minister's office through the portal that he has. So you don't have to wait for Patu to do it. But no, but I think all of us are experts. I'm not an expert. The lady there, please.
Good evening. I am Ravina. I'm a first-year commerce student at Lady Shri Ram College for Women. So my question to the panelists is that the teachers and parents community still have a mindset which makes them believe that placements are far, far, far better than startup. So the environment which is brought up in educational institutions, at least at the graduation level, does not foster the culture for startups. So do you think that we need reforms in the educational sector so that we are provided a more conducive and flexible environment for the startup culture?
That's a very good question. I think your real question is how to reform the parents, right?
And the teacher community.
Right. So I think we have a good set of questions, and I'm going to start with Raaja on my right and come to the other panelist. Raaja, first few questions were all about you, so you need to address those. About your former colleague, and the question was really about sustaining business. It's easy to launch into a startup.
Right. So there are a lot of business ideas out there. There are a lot of opportunities in a country like India. A lot of growth is going to take place in this country. Very good profit margins are going to be made. But all these things that I just mentioned require a patient, sustainable thought process, not deviating from a business model too much on a daily basis, not listening to the whims and fancies of people all the time and saying, this guy told me to do it this way, so I'll go about doing it this way. Really thrashing out your business plan in the beginning and then just going with it, unless there are some really crazy circumstances that are out there which are not in your control. So I really am a very strong believer in firstly thrashing out a business plan and puncturing as many holes as I can possibly into it along with my people, and then just following it through.
Thank you. Patu? Would you like to take this point one about the mindset which the young student raised? How do we reform parents? And do we need to reform the education sector or the parents too? Because essentially what she's saying is that when the placements come and you look at the lakhs that you might be earning, and then you say, I don't want those, I'd rather be starting my own company. Even today, despite the hype, is not easy.
I think this is the mindset of the past, which is still continuing, because I'm sorry, I'm eating something quietly. The point is that a teacher to you is just trying to guide you in the least risky fashion. Get a job, because still, whatever one may say, ultimately, there are many more people who are employees than entrepreneurs. So it is safer to go in that route. But when I was listening to your question, I feel that this will change when more successful entrepreneurs come out. Number two, the education system itself is completely overhauled, and that needs entrepreneurs too. And third is, with it, an automatic result will be a change in mindset of your elders, including your parents and your teachers, who will be ultimately the most important influencers to help you decide in your career.
No, but we also need to have in our education system a lot of courses which are geared towards entrepreneurship and how to be able to run businesses and be able to make the younger generation also think in that manner.
That's a good point, because one of the questions I got on a slip of paper is that should B schools then be institutes of entrepreneurship rather than just B schools, which are meant to. So how do we do that?
We have to do that. We have to put curriculums in place which facilitate youngsters to come out and do entrepreneurship. There should be workshops that are facilitating these people. There's entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs should be going to these campuses, be associated with these places, and go and talk about the good and the bad and the ugly.
Rather, that's already started, because many
but it's not going, it's not
have
happening
entrepreneurship 101, 201. So they're starting to create it. So I think that ecosystem will go together.
Yeah, but it needs to be there on a much
I have no doubt
scale.
that in 10, 15 years it will be very widespread.
But I think that's a great point, because if you have such courses and institutes offer this as a course, and maybe the institute itself calls itself an entrepreneurship institute, the parents know from the beginning what your child is getting into. It's about entrepreneurship and not just about getting a job, right? So I think that would help fix the parents as well. Rajesh, the point about employees, okay, and I'm going to ask you a deeper question built on that, which is that we've seen a lot of technology and innovation and startups and growth happening without jobs. Without job creation. That's one piece of it. And the second piece is that how do you keep the employees motivated? Because I will look at somebody saying that, this guy got $100 million, he's doing a great job, I'm hired, I'm still doing the same old job. He gets to earn when there is an exit from a IPO, I'm still going to be doing the same job. How do you ensure that in a culture of entrepreneurship, the employee, which is so critical for you, is also motivated?
Sure. No, so I guess that it's a fair point on the employee side for sure. And I'll tell you our own example of what we did. So when we set up Innovation Fund, so we were very clear. We actually opened it up for the employees as well. And if there is anyone who was interested, because see, the way we kind of looked at it, it was a win-win situation for us. If some employee who's capable, who has the potential, and he stands up and he says that, listen, I would want to do this more in an entrepreneurial environment, and I'm happy to have my, happy to take risk, and there's a huge amount of risk. I mean, and someone said in the past, there's an opportunity cost for somebody who gets into an entrepreneurial setup. He's not going to get fancy salaries, right? So there's a huge amount of opportunity cost. So therefore, we respect that, and we opened it up, and in fact created a structure, which we did not do it with our own employee, because we haven't really seen somebody really come up as yet, but hoping somebody will come up. But with someone else, who moved on from another e-commerce company, and he wanted to get into entrepreneurship, and we created a structure where there is skin in the game and there's enough equity ownership for that particular person, and majority backed by us, and with capital commitment, and we are doing that. So, to answer your question, we are quite open, because otherwise it's just unfair for some of the existing employees. But, we've seen, at least in our own experience here in MakeMyTrip, that not necessarily many. It does take a lot for you to actually stand up and say, listen, I'm going to take that risk and jump into it. But once you jump into it, having been in that, in the entrepreneurship for now 15 years, if we don't encourage that kind of behavior and encourage people to kind of just take, that journey, who else would do? I mean, that'll be unfair, right? So we've been doing that, and I think everyone should kind of do that. There are people who have actually left MakeMyTrip and got into entrepreneurship, by the way. Quite a few examples. And one of the leadership team members actually, Patu might know actually, Amit Sabharwal actually, he started his own venture as well. So he used to look after hotels for us. And there are a couple of other examples as well. So I think that's the approach that we should take. In terms of job creation, Pranjal, to your question, I think if you look at it in an overall perspective, the nature of the industry, and I think it'll be unfair if we only look at startups happening only in the internet or the online or the technology world. So back then when the ITES boom happened, there was the, tremendous amount of job creation that happened because the nature of the industry was that, because we were setting up BPO back offices and software development houses and, and catering to the entire world. Here, in the evolved technologies, there is a lot of technology that is there. So the amount of jobs that are being created in the technology space and the online product and otherwise, I mean, they are like tremendous. I mean, look at the size of all the internet companies evolved, and don't call them startup anymore. I mean, sometimes we make a mistake of like calling Flipkart also a startup today. Flipkart is like 10,000 people employed now. So Flipkart is not startup anymore. And similarly, we've got 1,500 people today on board, all kinds of people, and there are evolved, like look at InfoEdge, for example, not startup anymore. I don't know their people strength, but I'm sure it'll be in thousands as well. So I think a tremendous amount of job creation that has happened and will continue to keep happening.
But I'm going to counter that with a statistic and the point that one is job creation and second is creation of work. So I think work is being created, but I'm not sure jobs are being created. That's point one. Point two is that the economic survey presented a few days ago says, and it quotes and it's done a survey of the IT sector, 25% fall in creation of jobs by the IT and ITES sector in the last 1 year, which is, I think, scary from the point of view of job creation, but I think exciting from the productivity point of view. I want to take a few more questions and then come back to the panel. Any other students, especially who would like to ask questions? I'd like to encourage them as well. Any hands? Everybody's out of questions. That gentleman over there. Sir, we are all students for life. Can you wait for the mic, please? And then the mic can go to the gentleman at the back. Where are my friends with the mic? We need a technology solution for this. Okay, who's grabbing the mic and hiding it? Somebody who wants to ask the longest question.
Anyway, first my...
Sir, please introduce yourself.
My name is Sampath. I am in the strategic management group. Man by nature is self-interested. If an entrepreneur will allow another man to come to the same space, in fact, every industry started as entrepreneurship, and they didn't allow competition to come forward. Later, I am talking about in their life.
Thank you, sir. That's a good point. And there's a gentleman behind you over there, right at the back. Yes.
Very good evening, sir. I'm Arnav Chakravarti from Amity Global Business School. My question is that there is a buzz about entrepreneurship. Everybody is running about entrepreneurship. So that's very good for the country. But now there will be a situation when a lot of competition will be there in between entrepreneurs and employees will be a scarce commodity. So
sorry,
do you think
employees will be what?
Scarce, basically, yeah. So now what my question is to the panelists that do you think that even if you have a slightest of doubt in your mind that you can be a good employee but not that good entrepreneur, so you should hold yourself and wait for the right opportunity so that you can be a good employee of an entrepreneur.
Okay, that's a good point. I think gives us a lot of food for thought. The gentleman here and the lady at the back, please. So just wait for the mic and please do introduce yourself. The mic's coming to you. Can we have one more person for the mic, please? So 1 second, there are 2 more people before you. Now there's a lady before you. Please sit down, right.
Good afternoon, I am Dr. Sanjay Bahal from Sign Group of Institute. My question to all the 3 entrepreneurs, what are the 3 qualities you have got that you have scaled this ladder? Thank you.
Okay, that's a deep question. The lady, I saw a lady with her hand up. Where's that lady? Yes, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Meenakshi. I'm actually the editor of a magazine. My question basically is, first I want to appreciate something which Patu said about risk avoidance, that a good entrepreneur avoids risk. And my question comes from that, if an entrepreneur is actually avoiding risk, is there a fear that they will not push themselves to the possible limits of entrepreneurship that they can? I guess if they have a person investing money, yes, they may. But in a normal circumstance, would that overreaching not happen? Is that what you think?
That's a good point. So let me come to the panel here, and Patu, I'll begin with you. And I'm going to add one more question which I received on a slip, which is that, you know, everybody's, sir, I'll come back to you, please, if you can. Okay, no, we won't allow you to miss. Okay, why don't you ask a quick question, sir, but please be very brief.
Very quick question. I am Lakshmi Kumar, an author, retired banker and economist. My question is about before 2008, a lot of startups like company came. They raised the capital. Their valuation was very low. I fully agree with Raaja Kanwar about the crony capitalism. But now this new startup company will not burst in future. Like Flipkart, recently their valuation come down by 25%. This is my question, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So let me come to Patu about risk avoidance. But there's one more question I want to add from all these, which I'll come to all of you, is about, while we're encouraging startups, there is still the policy of allowing you to close the business and exit, which is still not there. So you're opening the door, but you're at the entrance, but you're keeping the exit door closed. So you're going to have a lot of interesting situations develop in a suffocating environment. Patu?
Well, I didn't mean you don't take risk. All I meant was that any entrepreneurial venture by definition is full of risk. Okay, and there are all kinds of risks. So, you name it, financial, market risk, competitor risk, government risk, which is the biggest risk very often, and many other types of risks. So you're swimming in a sea full of risks. All I'm saying is, among the most successful entrepreneurs I have had the pleasure to interact with, I have found there is one common theme, which is they know what risk not to take. Let me put it this way. Why are the public sector banks today talking about trillions of Indian rupees as NPAs? Has anybody asked? It's very simple. Most of these have been crony capitalists who have accessed these banks to take money out of actually the country and create, sorry, was that a banker who clapped? And have taken money out of the system, which would otherwise have gone to the healthy sector. They are the guys who've taken a lot of risk, but in an illegal way. Let me put it this way, in an unethical way. For example, in my own business, I had an opportunity to grow much faster than I did. Okay, I had a certain amount of equity. I could take debt equity at the level of, I could have twice as much debt as my equity, 1 time as much, or 0.5 as much. And when I did an evaluation, I found that I was comfortable with 0.5:1 debt equity. I'm giving you a real example. If I had gone to 1:1, which was also quite prudent, by the way, and a lot of my competitors had gone there, I would have been sick today. Okay. All I looked at was, what is the worst case scenario when the market will go to a certain level, and what can I safely cover? And the answer I came to was this. So I avoided risk. If I had taken 1:1, maybe I would have been twice as big, but I would have been sick. So basically, there are a lot of decisions like this that you have to take. All I meant was that if you really want a sustainable business and not one which is built on a bit of, risk, a bit of unnecessary risk, then the only thing I look at when I look at a business is how will it upset or how can it potentially disturb my system. I don't know if I've answered your question, but what I've tried to tell you is that it has worked for me. It may not have worked for everybody, but risk avoidance is a very, very integral part of what I do.
Thanks. Raaja, I want to come to you on also the point while I'll request them to share, but what are the qualities of success you see when you're looking at ventures to support? And are these the same qualities which you think that perhaps Patu and Rajesh had when they started? And me too. And Raaja, of course, you.
So obviously, for me, passion is very, very important. I want to be able to wake up every morning and be happy and be excited about where I'm headed. And if it's not there and if the fire is not there, then I think that I'm headed the wrong way. And that's the way I would look at an entrepreneur. So a drive to do something, being very passionate about it and having your head having your eyes on the ball. These are the three things that I would go for.
You know, one question which we didn't address was, how do you encourage entrepreneurship in non-tech sector? Now, you're working in mostly non-tech sectors, finance, infrastructure, logistics. Is there a way that the corporate sector and the government can work together to encourage entrepreneurship here? Because the returns are slow and perhaps take a longer period to come back.
Yeah, but you have the experts who, there are people who are specialized. Let's take waste management is something that we are looking at right now. So there are experts who've graduated colleges and who are into the environment, and they're looking to head companies or start up their ventures in the waste management area, whether it's on the e-waste side or the medical biohazard waste side. So you have all these kind of people around who are always not looking at just getting into the tech side, and they understand that gestation periods in this business will be longer, but will be will be fruitful, and the risk in those businesses is much lesser than that it is in the tech businesses.
So that's a great advice from him, that don't ignore the non-tech sector, because it's actually more returns and lower risk than one assumes. Rajesh, the point about employees, when should they know that they should stay on, or when should